Welcome to Today in Prophecy Daily News in 15 minutes or less, news with a perspective from the Bible. Well, Europe is preparing for World War III, and Hamas is the one that broke the ceasefire, not Israel. As many people are saying, Israel broke the ceasefire. Well, let's see what's going on there. But we're going to start here. Seems like quite a surprise. Listen to this first article. Christianity was borderline illegal in the Silicon Valley. Now it is the new religion. What is this about? It's mid-October in San Francisco. So that's obviously reflecting back a few months. And a crowd of 200 or more congregants, some seated in pews, others standing below cathedral windows at the back, bowed their heads in prayer over cranberry, apple cosmos, and plates of Burmese food served by black-shirted waiters. A DJ plays a thumping soundtrack of remixed worship music. This is not a church service or even a Bible study. It is instead an entirely new kind of event in Silicon Valley. We are here to listen in on the conversation between Dr. Francis Collins, the former director of the National Institute of Health, remember that name, Francis Collins, and leader of the Human Genome Project, and Gary Tan, the president and CEO of Silicon Valley's influential startup incubator Y Combinator, which has hatched thousands of tech companies with a combined valuation of more than $600 billion. Okay, so I want you to notice this first player here, Francis Collins. He's going to be talking to the people that are all there gathered for this particular type of meeting where they're going to be talking about Christianity. Now remember Francis Collins, he's best friends with Anthony Fauci. Remember him? Okay, and he claims that he is a Christian. Interesting dynamics with Francis Collins. In fact, one of my guests, John G. West, is going to be on the program here coming up soon, and going to be talking about Francis Collins with a little bit more insight. So Francis Collins comes along as a Christian, and also as you continue to read the article, it's a long article, says one of the reasons why people are doing this is maybe a spiritual reason because they are learning about Christ or they've come to know Christ. However, it appears that much of it is business related, and apparently Peter Thiel, you know who he is? Right? Also claiming Peter Thiel says he's a Christian too. So you have Francis Collins and Peter Thiel, and you start looking at this going, what in the world is really going on? A couple of different dynamics. So let me put it into a perspective, because maybe God is doing something, right? We watch certain things like Bill Maher's starting to talk reasonable. We watch what's going on with Joe Rogan. We can see things in real time happening. But let me give it another perspective too. Pastor Mike McClure, Calvary Chapel of San Jose, is up there in the area of the Silicon Valley, and the majority of people in this church, they work in the tech industry, in these businesses like Facebook and that are genuine believers. And so you do have genuine believers that are actually in Silicon Valley. I know it's hard to believe, but there are. Just like there are in Hollywood, there are some genuine believers in Hollywood too. God has his people scattered throughout the different parts of the world. Even as you read through the Gospel of Luke, I believe it's in Luke chapter 8, where you learn about Mary Magdalene, we find out that one of the women who would help Jesus and his disciples provide services and so forth, and sustenance like food and things, and just he had his disciples that were with him, and then he also had these women that were followers of Christ too that would follow him around. Mary Magdalene was one. One of the women that was in the ministry aspect with Jesus that followed him around was the wife of the chief steward of Herod. So here it is, the top politician in Herod's regime. His wife was a follower of Jesus. So listen, God has his people in all these different places. But what I see here when I hear a name like Francis Collins leading this, and I hear a name like Peter Thiel, and also as you continue reading the article, some of it definitely appears to be we're going over to Christianity because it puts us in, it might draw us closer to someone like Peter Thiel. So it's an interesting dynamic as you start looking at this for a financial gain. Many are now starting to pursue Christianity. So, but this takes us to 2 Timothy chapter 3, where we have in the last days perilous times will come. Men will be lovers of themselves rather than lovers of God, haughty, headstrong, selfish. You know that whole passage, right? And then you get into it a few verses and it says, they'll have a form of godliness but deny the power thereof. In other words, this form of spiritualism in the sense of it'll appear or they'll say they're getting right with the Lord, but it's not genuine Christianity. Is that what's going on? Listen, I don't know. I don't know any of these people, but I do know Mike McClure, pastor at Calvary Chapel, San Jose. There's genuine believers that are in his church that are in the tech industry. Well, we already established that, but is this a genuine awakening that's taking place in the Silicon Valley? Quite frankly, I don't know. But it is interesting. Christianity was borderline illegal in Silicon Valley before, and now it's the new religion. Very fascinating, vogue. It's in season. I just find it very interesting, and keep an eye on it. But I am concerned. Francis Collins and Peter Thiel, I'm going, a little bit of a problem there. But nevertheless, moving on from there, this article out of The Sun, survival guides, mass evacuations, huge bunkers and conscription, how the whole of Europe is preparing for World War III, how European countries are gearing up to fight Russia as calls for Britain to bring in conscription, grow. The continent is rearming as it fears Vladimir Putin is only years away from a war to push NATO out of Eastern Europe and rebuild the Russian Empire. So interesting as this article says, years away, you read something, it sounds like days away or hours away, what's really going on. We can watch what's going on with NATO. At a great program that's going to be tonight on his channel with Lee Brainerd, and we're going to be talking about NATO and this specifically, along with some other things. But as we look at this, Trump says, hey, we can help, but we're not just going to pour billions of dollars. We want to have an end to war, and Europe is going, hey, we're going to build up our own military. Listen, Europe's in trouble for all different reasons. One of them is the military aspect. I mean, could Europe really even build a military right now? I'm thinking they certainly can't build one very fast. I read the other day it would take them realistically 50 years to get to build up the military that they really need. Yet I'm someone that believes that it's out of Europe that there's going to be a revived Roman Empire, and Antichrist is going to rise out of that, and he is going to have a very strong military. But maybe what that's going to require is the rapture, which would eliminate a whole lot of problems for Antichrist, and then the collapse of the U.S., Russia and Turkey and Iran being destroyed by God in the Ezekiel 38 invasion, and then China's got its own problems, and then in this void, in this vacuum, Europe would rise to be the power broker of the world, the supreme power, a revived Roman Empire. So I don't know exactly how it's going to go, but this goes on to say the EU believes Russia could attack at some point around 2030 if Vladimir Putin is successful in Ukraine, and the Commission has said the bloc must prepare for a large-scale war with Moscow. Countries are preparing their citizens for a brutal fight, with calls for Britain to join the European nations already conscripting their people into growing armies. Civilians are also being prepared in the event of Russian tanks rolling down boulevards and paratroopers dropping onto squares. So they're talking about 2030. Don't you think it's rather interesting that this date, 2030, keeps coming up? It's been coming up for a long time. Agenda 2030 first got coined, I think it was in 2015. It used to be Agenda 21 for the 21st century. Then they needed, the people at the UN and the globalists needed a more specific target. So you changed that to Agenda 2030 with some specifics to come about in 2030, but it is constant. RFK Jr. saying by 2030, Klaus Schwab will almost have his dream. You'll owe nothing and be happy. Here, Europe is saying by 2030, we're looking at Russian troops in the streets of Europe, Russia taking over Europe. So, and it's just everything. It's everything from the tech industry to all of the different dynamics that are going on in the world. The whole world's going to be shaped. Everything's going to be ready by 2030. Is that date a coincidence? I'm starting to think it's not. You got to wonder. Nobody knows the day or the hour, but you got to wonder if what Satan's been able to figure out. Satan's not omniscient. He's not all-knowing. He doesn't know the day or the hour either, but he does have a good understanding of what this book actually teaches, and also the mind of God he understands much better than human beings in our humanness could understand, apart from the relationship we have as believers, which Satan cannot have, as believers with the Lord and the ministry of the Holy Spirit in us. So we can look at the Word and discern things because we are believers. But is it that Satan knows exactly what to look for, such as 1948, when Israel officially became a nation again, and he was able to look at that, knowing that that's the clock. Isaiah chapter 11, when Israel's gathered back a second time, and only a second time, that officially began in 1948. That officially began his countdown. And could it be, by his math, he's able to look at things and go, 2030 is that date? Listen, I don't know, but it is interesting, even in this article about the EU and war, saying 2030. Just that date keeps coming up. It comes across from just about everybody. You listen to the tech giants. You listen to things about the economy. You listen to things where they talk about pestilence. Everything comes down to, we've got to get this resolved. We have until 2030. The date is just constantly thrown at us. Probably the same reason why we have such mass confusion, that is brainwashing that has been going on with the people here, especially in the Western world, with the gender madness and the things that happened over the last 5 years with that shot in the arm thing. Remember that? All of these different things meant to confuse the masses. Why? I believe it's all in preparation, and it appears, I don't know, I just don't think it's a coincidence that 2030 is the date. Even the Sustainable Development Goals, 17 Sustainable Development Goals of the UN and everything. Trump threatens to annihilate the Houthis, tells Iran to stop arming them. Listen, what's going to happen with Iran? Is Trump just going to go in and just say, you know what, we've had enough, we're taking out, we are just absolutely, we're going in, we are going to come along Israel's side, we're going to deal with the Iran problem once and for all. We've had it, not going to put up with this anymore. We are watching things continue to escalate. I believe the U.S. is probably going to get involved. If you didn't have an opportunity to see the podcast that I did with Bill Salas the other day, it was live. I believe it was on Tuesday, where we were able to get into this, what's going on with Iran, the prophecy of Jeremiah chapter 49 in the area of Elam. I encourage you to go over and check that out if you haven't seen it yet. Listen, I'm going to skip to the last article. This is out of All Israel News, the publication by Joel Rosenberg. American UN envoy rejects claims Israel violated ceasefire. Blame lies solely with Hamas. I totally agree. Listen, I don't have time to get into this whole thing, but here's the problem. People are saying, it's being touted all over the place, Israel broke the ceasefire. Did they really? Listen, Hamas didn't honor the ceasefire. Israel finally said, we've had enough. You aren't returning our people anymore. In fact, most of them that are left are even dead, and you won't even return the bodies anymore. Plus, in the process, you paraded, you did all of these things that are against the agreement that we had. You paraded babies, dead bodies, babies in coffins, and you celebrated. No, Israel finally said enough is enough. And I don't look at this as Israel breaking the ceasefire. I look at it as Hamas did. They did not honor the ceasefire. And Israel says, you guys aren't going to honor it, neither are we. Listen, that's all we have time for now. God bless.